Production funding for Ruckus has been provided by gifts from Dave and Jamie Cummings, the Hartwig family, Hush Blackwell, Barbara and Peter Gattermeyer, and by viewers like you. Thank you.
Welcome to Ruckus, our weekly food for thought fight over the news of the day and the trends of the times. I'm Mike Shannon. The Ruckettes join me shortly. Our topics this week: the State of the Union, the state of Mike Sanders' future, and a new state leader in Kansas, plus roast and toast. But we start with our Newsmaker segment and focus on the always controversial topic of immigration. At issue today is DACA, delayed action for childhood arrivals. DACA is the result of an executive order issued by former President Barack Obama in 2012. It is not a law passed by the Congress. Its purpose is to protect so-called dreamers from deportation. Dreamers are generally defined as children brought to this country at a young age who grew up in the U.S. and consider it home, and they should not be held responsible for entering the country without government approval. Here to talk about all of this is Alex Martinez. Alex is director of the Kansas-Missouri Dream Alliance. Mr. Martinez, welcome to Ruckus. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So tell me what the Dream Alliance is, what it does, and how big it is.
So the Kansas and Missouri Dream Alliance is a group of youth-led organization that works in both states to kind of rally around the issues like DACA and undocumented issues. We have a large membership. And we have a lot of different allies, and we are part of bigger coalitions. We're also part of a bigger network, the network of United We Dream. We're an affiliate, an official affiliate.
Is there a website that you can suggest if people want more information about it?
Yeah, we are ksmoda.org, or you can find us on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram.
Okay. Dreamers, as I mentioned, are generally described as young people brought to this country at a very early age, 2, 3, 4 years old, before they had any idea of what was happening to them. They came usually with their parents, and they had no role in the decision.
Absolutely.
And they have known no other home than the United States, and they deserve to stay here because of that. Your circumstance is somewhat different, as I understand it.
It's a little bit different. I still fall under the same category, but I came to the United States when I was 14. I came through the Mexican-Texan border, and I came through as an unaccompanied minor.
You did this by yourself?
I did this by myself, yes.
Must have been kind of tough.
It was very traumatic at the time, and it's definitely something that today's politics or today's political climate is triggering still. Because of everything that I went through.
All right, the Trump administration has proposed in the State of the Union a plan where 1.8 million dreamers would be legalized and put on a path for some of them to citizenship.
Yes.
Then, in addition, there would be money for a border wall. Chain migration would end, and the visa lottery would come to an end. Do those terms generally please you as a dreamer?
So people would think that that will make us happy, and that's what we want. Ultimately, we want citizenship, yes, but we don't want it at the cost that the administration is suggesting. And let's just say it's racist because it's cutting people out. They want to keep people out, so they're using dreamers or
but they're adding 1.8 million potential citizens.
Right, but they are using us as leverage to keep people out. So they're suggesting cutting immigration by 50%. That's legal immigration. We're not talking about undocumented folks coming to the U.S. We're talking about actual legal immigration.
But that's but that is a country's right, is it not? A government's right to control its immigration.
Absolutely. But the immoral reason is that they're using us as leverage. We are the bargaining chip, and we're not going to take that. We rather not become citizens than giving more money to the border to militarize the border. That money also goes to ICE pockets. And ICE will
Immigrations and Customs Enforcement.
And they will terrorize our families and deport our families. So even if we get citizenship, our families will not.
So do you live daily in fear of deportation? Do you think the federal government's going to sweep in and deport young people?
Absolutely. This is something I think about it every day. It's something I can't escape. I see it in my work. I see it in the community. I see it in everything I do.
So what do you think will happen if March 5th comes and goes and there's no new DACA bill?
Well, I think it'll be devastating, not only
Do you think they'll begin deportation immediately, or do you think it'll be delayed?
I don't think we will begin deportation immediately, but I mean, we shouldn't, because it just seems impossible to deport that many people, and also the economic consequences. It's just hard to think about that, but we hope that it doesn't get there. But I don't think they will start deporting people immediately. They are, however, detaining people right now. They're detaining a lot of people. Last year compared to this year, the amount of people detained has gone up. However, the amount of people deported
coming in has gone down,
right.
I think. Yeah.
Well, the people coming in has gone down, and the people being deported has also gone down. So people are spending more time being detained.
I hate to do it, but I got to stop you there because we have tight time restraints. Thank you for coming in. Good luck to you.
Thank you so much.
Alex Martinez, director of the Kansas-Missouri Dream Alliance. Now let's meet the panel and start a ruckus. Denidre Herbert is the managing editor of The Sentinel, a conservative website covering Missouri and Kansas news. John Stevens is the maestro at Rock Hill Strategic. Jamaica Kendricks is an educator and education activist. And Crosby Kemper III is head of the Kansas City Library System and a host of KCBT's Meet the Past and Centropolis programs. It is great to see all of you again. Thank you very much for coming in. There is a lot to talk about, so let's go. Any political career Mike Sanders might have envisioned came to a screeching halt late last week. The former Jackson County prosecutor and county executive entered a guilty plea to a corruption charge in federal court. Also entering a guilty plea, Sanders' longtime chief of staff, Calvin Williford. The two were accused of wire fraud, essentially taking money raised by political committees for their own use. As many of you realize, Sanders was from time to time a panelist on Ruckus. On all the occasions he was here, Mike came in on time, usually early, and he was certainly on point in expressing his views. The two defendants face potential time in jail and huge fines. The Sentinel website took a look at the Sanders case in a recent edition, and you had a slightly different perspective than other people seem to have. What was it?
Well, I might sound a little bit cynical, and I should add that my colleague Jack Cashill actually wrote that, but I think the main point he was trying to make is that we all missed this. He left in the middle of the night, and I know John said earlier, everybody thought there was something wrong, but I feel kind of silly for not recognizing it. He left in the middle of the night, and I do wonder, as a cynical consumer of local media, whether his departure in the middle of the night with kind of a weak excuse and everybody going, that makes sense, no it didn't, is that he was a Democrat, and Democrats can kind of seem to be able to get away with that kind of thing more than Republicans.
Well, I think one of the points in the article was that the Star, in its story about Sanders, did point out in an early paragraph that he was a Democrat, and that's not always the case.
After the fact, though, I mean, long after the fact, there was a long period of time in which Mike Sanders was kind of Mike Sanders.
He was a good government guy.
Yes,
you know, we all thought. Gosh. I mean, I was close to him. I'm a Republican. I was close to Mike, and I always thought he was a good government guy. And Cal Williford, I was close to as well. Worked with him in the library a lot. You know, money and power corrupt. I mean, this is a simple story, and it's not a Republican or Democratic story.
True.
Though it does have. There's a public policy issue here at the county and at the city. We have no civic oversight and not a lot of any other kind of oversight. We have billion-dollar no-bid contracts coming out. We have a problem right now in the county with combat money being used to pay staff members, et cetera, which is not the same thing that Mike might go to jail for, but it's the same kind of lack of oversight and the same kind of loose flow of money, consulting contracts in the city, et cetera. There is no civic oversight. The civic institutions in this city are really weak.
Well, some people are suggesting there should be a closer look at what's going on in the county because of the Sanders case, and with regard to the railroad commuter line that was talked about and that he consulted on after he left office.
Certainly, I completely agree with Crosby. Jackson County, the Jackson County legislature, it has nothing to do with partisan politics. It has to do with it has been overlooked by too many people for too long, and as especially journalists, and no offense to anyone, it's as journalism has been stretched thin, more and more thin, the Jackson County legislature and the happenings in the county legislature have really been forgotten. And a lot of things kind of slide through, both legal above board and maybe not.
I agree with Crosby on this. That it is.
Look at this.
It's just.
Universal
I know.
praise of Crosby.
It isn't. I think it's an issue in politics where the power corrupts you, the position, and everything that comes along with that. And I think there are so many people who get into it to do the right thing. And like Crosby said, he was a good government guy. It's not like he was a terrible person, but he was in a position to be able to do some things that probably he wouldn't ordinarily do. And now he's taking advantage of it, and he's not the first. He won't be the last. And the only way we change that is we change our expectations. We change what's going on at the county level. But this just isn't a county thing. It's a state thing. It's a political thing. So that's all the way up. We need to start looking at how are we electing people, what powers are we granting them, and how do we hold them accountable for what it is that they're doing.
Did Sanders ever offer any explanation for his actions?
Not
Why
that
he
I'm
took the
aware of.
money?
No.
Not that I
not-
His
I don't think he will.
explanation for resigning from office was his father had died not long before, and he was reminded of one's limited time on this earth, and he wanted to spend more of it with his family.
And he was very
could-
close to his family.
and he was close to his family.
But I think
and,
that
Maybe
was
that's
true.
why he used the
and
money.
he could make
for-
a lot more money in the private sector.
But he was telling the truth. He was under investigation. He knew it. And he wanted to make sure that he was focused on his family and moving back to that. That's probably true. He wanted to focus on his family. He knew what was coming.
All right, we're going to go on because I know what's coming next. It's going to be a big topic.
Yes.
First day of February, also the first full day as governor for Jeff Collier, the Johnson County plastic surgeon who has spent the past 7+ years as Sam Brownback's second in command. As Governor Brownback departed to his new role as U.S. Ambassador for Religious Freedom, Collier took on his new role, facing a myriad of issues, none more pressing than the state Supreme Court's demand for more school funding. While Collier starts running state government, he must also continue running to become the GOP nominee for governor in the August primary. So is he able to do both, set the state on the right course, and win the nomination? We start with Crosby.
Well, Mike, I expect Governor Dr. Collier is, of course, a plastic surgeon. I expect a facelift for the state of Kansas. And he'll set a new tone. We've had a really bad tone in Kansas politics for a lot of different reasons, in the Brownback era and the tax cuts and the fights over education. He'll set a new tone. The problem is he's still going to have to deal with a budget that's going to be badly out of whack. 2/3 of the budget's basically mandated for education and health care, and revenue's still not going up in the state of Kansas.
And there's still more money going to be demanded for education.
Well, and we have the Supreme Court making decisions that are totally analytical, that unanalytical, that are without any reasonableness themselves, and they don't tell us where the money is coming from. We've already started to raise taxes again, so it's going to be tough for him.
I've read that there's a prospect that Collier is thinking about trying to meet with the school districts involved in that lawsuit and finding some sort of a way to settle things.
I've heard that too, and I don't know if it's true, and I don't see how that will work. I think unless the participants drop the lawsuit, which I don't see them happening, and the court has to say we won't, like they're holding on to it. Last time with Montoy, they kind of said, okay, you guys worked it out, we're done here, and this time they're saying we're going to hold on to this until you guys do what we want, basically.
And let me ask you this, as Collier perhaps becomes more moderate in his dealing with legislators and his
Yes, he's
approach to
frustrated.
issues, then what happens to people in the party on the right wing?
Well, I'll tell you what I heard yesterday. I was there yesterday, and he basically said in his speech, well, it was very vague, but it sounds like he wants to absolutely capitulate and just hand over $600 million, when in the meantime we have this very real issue of a bureaucrat deciding to just give out an extra $45 million for sure, but maybe up to $400 million in unauthorized payments to schools for transportation. And I don't know how you just say, yeah, we're just going to do it under that umbrella, and I feel like that's what he said in his speech.
John,
you're
involved in city-county government in Kansas. What will this mean to the county, to Wyandotte County, Kansas City, Kansas, the fact that there's a new governor, maybe a more moderate Republican?
Perhaps, but I think more than moderate, it's about open lines of communication. I don't think it's capitulation. I think there has been a governor that has been very caustic, and in many cases has thrown hand grenades within the legislature, within the judicial, within a lot of issues. Governor Collier, I hope, will strike a moderate tone, and not just the tone, especially if he wants to do something. He needs to get in rooms, negotiate with both sides of the leadership, and come to some real solutions. That's the only way. You know, if he starts campaigning today for election, he's not going to get anywhere. He needs to focus on good governance, finding solutions for Kansans. And I think he can do it if he gets in a room with the legislature.
Can he get the nomination if he doesn't start campaigning pretty soon?
No, I honestly don't think there's a path. I love Dr. Collier, but I'm not sure there's a path. He's got Kobach to his right. He's got a ton of people to his left, and there's such a narrow, and he's got the brown bag baggage.
He has the ability to be governor right now.
Yeah,
nobody else has that opportunity. He has the ability to show what he can do right now. And one of the things that I read about him that I really liked is that he went out and when he was talking to some high schoolers about what was happening with them, it was reported that what he did mostly was listen. And he was asking them, what are your teachers doing to support you? How did you cope with these tragic events that happened with you? And when politicians actually listen to the people that they are supposed to be serving and working with, that's when you're able to identify those areas where you can compromise and actually make it where nobody's actually losing. And I think that he has the ability to demonstrate that he can do that now in a space where they hadn't had that before. So if he shows that, I believe that there is a path for him to get there because people want something different. We thought there was no path for Trump. Guess who's president?
I don't know who is. I do know. We're going to talk about that in just a second. There's been big discussion in the Star, lengthy articles and editorials about transparency, the lack thereof in Kansas. Is that something that Collier could take advantage of?
I think he could, and I think that's a real issue in Kansas. You know, the Department of Education won't give out information. The National Center for Teacher Quality came in and wanted to know some things about teachers in Kansas. Neither the Department of Education nor the university system would give any information out. It's across the board in Kansas. This is a problem.
And something a new governor could take on.
He can do something about it. He can mandate it.
All right. Speaking of Donald Trump, which you did, it is in the U.S. Constitution. The president shall, from time to time, give to the Congress information on the state of the Union and recommend to their consideration such measures as he shall judge necessary and expedient. Before the days of mass media, the president simply sent his message. Clearly, that is no longer the case. President Trump gave his first State of the Union address Tuesday evening, and let me point out, he did not say,
"You're fired."
Although he probably wishes he could have to Democrats in the chamber who were generally unresponsive to his comments. Trump reiterated his position on immigration, legalize 1.8 million dreamers, build the wall, end chain migration, and stop the visa lottery, adding,
"I am extending an open hand to work with members of both parties, Democrats and Republicans, to protect our citizens of every background, color, religion, and creed. My duty and the sacred duty of every elected official in this chamber is to defend Americans, to protect their safety, their families, their communities, and their right to the American dream, because Americans are dreamers too."
So, on balance, taking into consideration both style and substance, how did the president do? And we start with John.
Well, I mean, he using the dreaded teleprompter that as Citizen Trump he criticized heavily, he desperately tried to strike a conciliatory tone through most of his speech. I think immigration got a little more partisan. But since the bar is laying on the ground as far as what the expectations of Trump, he certainly cleared it. I mean, I think he clearly exceeded expectations, I think, of many people. And I think he delivered what people wanted to hear that are supporters of him, and he didn't draw incredible ire from those who are
unless you were
Well,
watching Nancy Pelosi.
how about the
during her
Democrats?
speech.
They were just sitting there throughout the entire speech.
Schumer smiled every once in a while and gave light clapping, but Nancy Pelosi looked like she was having an operation.
Is this
Well,
not
whereas
what the
the Republicans-
Republicans did when Obama was doing the same thing?
I don't know if it was to that extent.
It was.
It's getting worse.
I mean, when
It
you're
was.
saying people are making more money, unemployment
everybody
is
sits
lower,
on
and
their
nobody's
hands.
applauding,
Yeah.
those are lines that Americans
Well,
respond to.
he's taking credit for things that he didn't do.
You know-
So when we're talking unemployment, and his big thing was Hispanic employment is the lowest and black employment is the lowest. Okay, it was the highest in 2010 at 16.8.
Time out.
It started going down dramatically at 2010. It's been going down a point every year since then. So he's just on board of the train that
But
already got started moving.
if it had gone higher, would you have blamed him?
No, I wouldn't have blamed him.
You had a
Here's the
point of
thing.
view here.
Well, here's the thing. Trump didn't hit a home run, but he's on third base. It was a great speech, and everybody's
He's on
here,
third base
and you
for
guys
his
are trying to
supporters.
pick apart everything
That's
and
not true.
debating policy. And here's the thing: what people are going to remember from that speech is not that he did it, but that we did it. He used the word "we." He
Are
used
you
the word
serious?
"our."
Like-
and they're going to remember those guests
You
that
are
he had.
conservative.
The guy standing up there with his.
You are a
with
conservative
his
who
crutches.
supports him.
They're going
So
to
that
remember.
is how
Well,
you
hang on,
saw.
Jamaica,
But it
hang
didn't
on.
change
Jamaica, hang-
his mind.
Jamaica,
I'm
whoa.
talking about people like my husband who's not very political. He was moved by that speech, moved by it, and not by the things that he said in the policy things. He doesn't care about that. But the guy with the crutches and the family that adopted the baby and the parents who are crying for their daughter, that's what he's going to remember. And most people who watch the speech aren't like us.
Right,
They're
except none of that
real
is
people.
about policy.
No, true.
Thank
It was
you.
an hour and 20-minute speech.
100%
And it was
agree with
all
you.
about those lovely human interest stories, and we all
that's why he's on third base and not home. Not
He's
at the
not
home.
third
but it's not
base.
third base. It wasn't a State of the Union speech. It was a human interest TED talk.
Thank you.
Do you think that's not what it should be? I'm just curious.
Yeah, I want to go
It's a-
back
it
to
should
when
be a
Thomas
policy list.
Jefferson
It's a
said,
State of the Union
laying
speech.
out.
But
I like
what he did offer a concrete proposal on immigration, on
He
DACA.
did.
He
Yeah.
said
He did.
1.8 million dreamers
Yeah.
can become
Yes.
legal.
Right.
But in return, Democrats will have to agree to $20 billion or so to build a wall, which
Right.
was promised during the campaign and
Right.
people seem to want, in what's called chain migration and the visa lottery.
And so just in the last 3 weeks, he's been in about 9 different places on that issue. So the Democrats are not really willing.
Well,
at
so
this
have the
stage.
Democrats.
Well, I don't know. I think they've got, they've announced that they would give up something to him
and then took it back.
well,
Right.
Schumer said
he
money
took
for
it
the
back
wall,
too.
then took it back.
I mean, he's not really negotiating with them, so that's the problem.
And sadly, let's be honest, what people are going to remember is, unfortunately, his tweet from this morning claiming that it was the most watched, highest rated
I actually don't think most
State of
people
the
are going to
Union.
remember that because it's a
Well,
tweet. Not everybody's on Twitter, but
I don't think
everybody's going to remember that
I don't think anybody's
Don't
going to
mind.
remember the
guy.
speech at all.
Yeah, exactly.
But I will
Thank
say,
you.
I will say this. I think the truth is that Trump's in a little bit better position now. It wasn't an awful speech.
I would agree with that.
The economy's doing well. There's an immigration deal on the table.
Third base.
He's proposed, and it'll never get through Congress because there's no there
first
there.
one out.
A huge infrastructure plan. So his numbers have gone up a little bit, and they'll stay up a little bit for a little while. We'll see.
Got to stop. Is it untrue that it was the most watched State of the Union speech?
It's been proven
Yeah,
untrue.
it's
Bush, Reagan, and Obama speeches were all higher
All
rated.
right. Now we're going to head to the soapbox for Roast and Toast, where the Ruckettes have 30 seconds each to pander or slander people and events in the news. We start with Crosby.
So I'd like to point out that everybody's got their buffoons, and it's been revealed in the last month that Senator Harry Reid created something called the Advanced Aviation Threat Identification Program 2009, and for 8 years we spent multiple millions of dollars looking for UFOs, which is simply proof that, yes, even the Democrats will do anything to find aliens in this country.
Did we find any UFOs?
No.
No, okay. John?
I'd like to give a roast to policy leaders and transit leaders. Kansas and Missouri, particularly both sides of the metro, have experienced an unprecedented increase in traffic deaths and pedestrian-related fatalities. And I think it's unfortunate that we don't have policies and direction to mitigate that, especially since we should be seeing a decline due to technology and safety within vehicles. And instead, we continue to see a rise. And I think they're missing the boat.
All right, Jamika.
First, I have to give a shout out to all of the 5th graders at Symington Elementary who are going to be watching tonight. And then I want to give a toast to Dr. Anthony Lewis of Kansas City Public Schools. I just read that he is going to be leading the Lawrence Public School System. And he has been, in all my interactions with him, has always been focused on what's best for students and teachers together. So congratulations.
Denidra.
I have a strongly worded roast for Kansas Attorney General Derek Schmidt, who is the top law enforcement officer of the state of Kansas, and he has sent a letter to legislators and the state school board saying they should investigate an audit that said the school districts or the school board of education has sent money, misallocated funds, and he's couched all of this in some euphemisms like outside of law and contrary to state statute, and he'd like them to work together to audit them. And the appropriate thing is he's the top law enforcement officer, and that sounds like it means illegal, which means he has the authority and the ability to investigate, and he should.
And finally, here's a toast to Oscar. He is the dog in this picture shown watching a recent episode of Ruckus. Oscar sets a good example for all of us. We should follow the news with dogged determination. And thanks to Woody Kozad, who received that picture from friends, and he forwarded it to us. And that is Ruckus for this week. Back next Thursday at 7. Now for the Ruckettes and the crew, Mike Shannon saying thanks for watching and good night.